All right, before we get into the schizoid versus autism stuff, first thing, potato of the day goes to Mason. Thank you for reading my video descriptions. It's nice to know some people still do that. Anyway, enjoy the potato, imaginary potato, but potato of the day for Mason. Okay, a comment. So, I just want to say, I haven't looked at this topic in a while because I don't really care that much, so I'm doing it off the top of my head. If you want a really solid, like well-researched, well-structured video about schizoid versus autism, other people have made those videos, other people have made articles, they've got dot points, they've got comparison things, whatever. You don't come to me for that, you come to me for the chaos and like my own take on it. So just to let you know, it's not going to be a perfect this is how they are. No, mainly looking at this comment, I do get other comments sometimes asking different things, and I try to answer, but I don't know, for some reason, this one just caught my eye. So let's get into it. Woodstock Envy asks, or says, I don't know if it was a question or a statement. No, it was a question. So, since it seems like schizoid is usually associated with very high-functioning people, I wonder if it could sometimes also be associated in some way, i.e. paralleled with what once was called Asperger's, now ASD. I say this simply because Asperger's or very high-functioning autism seems to involve social issues as missing subtle social cues, and thus I arrive at my conclusion that these folks preferring solitude is just easier than the exhausting demands of socializing, as is found in Asperger's achievers. Thanks. Okay, it's a little bit of a confusing comment. Maybe that's why it caught my eye, I don't know, but I want to go through a few things. Let's just go start to finish. Okay, schizoid is usually associated with very high-functioning people. I don't know where you're getting that idea. Schizoid people often don't come forward for treatment. That doesn't mean they're necessarily doing well. Not being able to come forward for treatment, that's a barrier in life. That's not functioning completely well. Like, schizoids can do well if they're in a solitary job and no one is bothering them and they've gotten into their own routine. Some schizoids do well with that. Some, like me, who also have depression, life is terrible, and yeah, I'm not a functioning person. Like, I can seem high functioning. And what is even meant by high functioning? Like, if high functioning used to be mainly used in autism, talking about autism, I'm someone who grew up around very severely low functioning autistic people. So I guess my perspective is a little bit different. I've seen the kids who cannot communicate, who get really frustrated and will bash their heads into a wall. One of Mikey's my intellectually disabled brother. He doesn't have autism, mum just uses that as a shorthand, but it's just a general intellectual impairment plus cerebral palsy and epilepsy. Anyway, one of his classmates, I think like they went to school together, but then they also went to the same day program as adults for a while before NDS changed everything. And that kid, I've met him a few times, he's very quiet and like, don't know what's going on in his head. He just, like, would escape, and there's one time they didn't know where he was. It turned out he had just walked all the way home. He just got up from what he was doing, no one was watching, which they're supposed to do, and he just walked home. It's like, okay, mate. You know, so there's those levels, but then I've also seen some of his other schoolmates, because their classes are kind of weird at special school. Like, it's not based on age, it's more, like, based on needs and, you know, what kinds of teachers suit them best, I think. I don't understand. No one really explained it to me, that's just what I observed. But so there were some more high-functioning classes, and at these schools they used to do concerts. And actually Brad Hazard, who was the New South Wales health minister during COVID and, you know, around for ages before that, he used to always go to those concerts. So I actually used to see him there because I would go too. And yeah, there was this one year, or maybe a couple years, where they had I think he was an autistic kid, but he was able to sing, and that was his kind of thing. Wasn't the best singing, but like compared to the other kids there, it was like, wow, he can actually hold a microphone, remember the lyrics, and sing the thing. So, you know, that's kind of the level of sort of high functioning in that kind of an environment. These days, high functioning, they tend to talk about people with very mild autism who can still do things around the place. But I think high functioning, it isn't really used these days. It's also been talked about, like, when you have depression, but you're still able to get on with your life, you're considered high functioning, even though you might be suffering really badly. But I think it's sort of increasingly become this vague term, because even with, like, people who seem to have mild autism, like they're able to talk to people and whatever, doesn't necessarily mean they have functioning lives, like they're able to do, I don't know, it's confusing. And so autism, these days now do like level 1, 2, and 3. I can never remember if level 1 is the severe one or if level 3 is the severe one, because it's confusing like that. And oh my god, someone's walking around. Please don't walk around while I'm trying to make videos, it's really annoying. Yeah, so what does high functioning mean? Like, stop walking around, I'm trying to make a video. It's just really fucking annoying. Oh my god. Oh, and like the slamming of the door, that's so unnecessary. Can't you like turn the knob as you close the door? Anyway, where was I? I'm just determined not to edit the video because that takes time. And anyway, no, high functioning with schizoid. Okay, with schizoids. So schizoids, like, the thing about autism is, for a lot of kids, it comes with an intellectual impairment. Now, autistic activists want to try and say that that isn't part of autism, and they want to separate severe autism from the intellectual impairment. And to me, having seen these kids who are really severely impacted, like, mild autistic people generally have no idea what it's like on the severe end of the spectrum, like the really severe high needs kids. They haven't seen them. They've only seen their friends who are mildly autistic too, and so they think that's what autism is. But there is a whole other world of severe disability, severe intellectual disability, and severely autistic kids who, you know, like, whatever, that's a whole other debate. So anyway, with autism, when you're talking about high functioning, often it has to do with that intellectual capacity, although these days now it's more to do with autistic barriers, so there's been a change of definition. But with schizoid, as far as I'm aware, there isn't an association with intellectual impairment in the same way that profoundly severe autistic has that association. So for schizoids, like, I guess they can seem like just every other person except being very withdrawn, and maybe that's what you mean by high functioning is, you know, and a lot of schizoids will spend a lot of time deep in thought because they're away from people, not interested, just in their own minds, in their own worlds and so on, and so there's a lot of thoughtfulness. Now, thoughtfulness is not the same as intelligence. I think there's quite a lot of schizoids who think that just because they think a lot, they're also smart. That's not necessarily the case. But in general, they don't seem to be intellectually impaired. Now, the difference might be if they're more on the schizophrenia side of things, because schizoid and severe schizoid can look a lot like the negative symptoms of schizophrenia, which is, I've talked about before, but the positive symptoms of schizophrenia is like the things that are added to your experience, like weird delusions and paranoias and whatever. The negative symptoms of schizophrenia are the things that are taken away, like the ability to feel and whatever. So, yeah, like if you have really, and the negative symptoms of schizophrenia, they can get quite severe if it's actually schizophrenia and not schizoid. So maybe you'd see something that it affects someone's ability to think in a way that you might not think they're high functioning. I don't know, don't take my word on that, because I haven't looked deeply into it. I'm just not that interested in the topic. And, what was the other thing? High functioning, I don't know, like, maybe that's why you think schizoids are high functioning, but how many schizoids has anyone ever met? Not many. There are schizoids who make YouTube videos, but I'm one of the few ones who just doesn't disappear. Like, some of them make one video or two videos and then you never hear from them again. So do you know how well they're doing? No. Yeah, and a lot of schizoids have a lot of trouble with life. Also, important to know, schizoid is a personality disorder, very different to a neurodevelopmental autistic spectrum disorder. So, you know, as a personality disorder, it's not coming with those neurological issues, like the neurodevelopmental stuff with autism. Then it makes sense that some of them, the really severely affected ones, might have an intellectual impairment because it's all neurodevelopmental. It's brain stuff, the way the brain is put together, the brain processes stuff. So you get autism and like intellectual thing on the side. Like, that makes sense as a package. Whereas a personality disorder, they generally think caused by trauma most of the time. Schizoid's a bit weird because it's like there is an overlap with schizophrenia as well. So, you know, I have a bit of my own theory where there might be two forms of schizoid, where one is actually the personality disorder caused by some kind of trauma, and then the other one is more just like pre-schizophrenia, which schizoid can be pre-morbid to schizophrenia. I guess there's some question about what causes schizophrenia then, because some of it can be triggered by environmental factors, but there's also like brain chemistry things going on. Brain chemistry probably being different to neurodevelopmental brain development. I hope I'm not being too confusing there. Anyway, so schizoid as a personality disorder, I suppose in theory you start off as a normal kid, you have terrible experiences, and it affects the way that you deal with the world, so it's quite different to neurodevelopmental. Okay, so 10 minutes rambling on the high functioning question. Like, I just think if we start off with that assumption, you know, that's maybe causing some confusion there, and I don't think it's necessarily a valid assumption to make. This is me as someone who spent way too much time in uni thinking that if I just studied one more thing that would fix me and I would finally find something that I'm interested in enough to turn into a career or just have a life. Towards the end of uni, or maybe it was actually more in the middle, I just sort of got the shits with things, and especially when going to music school lecturers aren't always the most thoughtful, intelligent, academic kinds of people. And so there was one, sorry to go on a tangent, but there was this one essay. I was studying music theatre, but music theatre theory. I was studying the theory of it. And so you look at like some of the music stuff and some of the background and whatever. Anyway, the essay question was something like, you know, the success of a musical or music theatre production, like, it has to have a good story to be successful, and then you had to analyze a production and say why the story made it successful. And I decided to dispute that. And I made my comparison. I took the Jekyll and Hyde musical, which the story is a bit weird, but it's based on classic literature, the Jekyll and Hyde musical, and I compared it to Mamma Mia, which has a terrible story, but pop music. And of course, Mamma Mia was vastly more successful than the Jekyll and Hyde musical. And so instead of, like, you know, the essay question assumed that the story is the most important thing. And I said, no, I'm going to dispute your original assumption and ignore the rest of the question and make my argument. And the lecturer, he actually really liked it, so I got pretty good marks for that, whereas I think all the other kids just went along with what they were told to think. Anyway, you should never start an essay question with that kind of an assumption. But same thing for, like, I know, it's just social media, and it's just like social media comments, but if you were going to ask me a question, consider your assumptions before you ask me a thing. Okay, anyway, moving on from that and that tangent. I wonder if it can sometimes be associated parallel. Okay. Okay, well, so Woodstock Envy singles out the social issues. Okay. It's complicated because, like, there is some overlap, at least on a superficial level, between autism and schizoid. How to approach this? Like, in theory, you could have both. Now, I don't think they're generally diagnosed together because generally, I'm pretty sure one of them will have some kind of criteria saying, here are the symptoms you have, and it's not better explained by blah, 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 blah. So I think it would be kind of rare to actually have both diagnoses at the same time, but you could in theory fit both criteria. But there are some key differences, and actually the social issues thing is one of the biggest differences, I think, between autism spectrum and schizoid. Because, I mean, you know, I've met, high functioning people, I've met people with mild autism. And, you know, I have friends who have mild autism, and something I've noticed, like, yeah, we can get on fine, but what I've noticed is they do want to socialize. Most I mean, I don't know if this is true for all autistic people, and I guess it depends on what experiences they've had, but generally, autistic people, in my experience, they seem to want to socialize. The problem is because they're misinterpreting cues and socializing can be stressful, they tend to withdraw because socializing is so difficult, or they're rejected by people. And so who are they going to socialize with if everyone has rejected them? And so they will try to do things. They might develop anxiety as well after those experiences, and that might make them reluctant to go socialize, but they still want to. Whereas, as a schizoid, I socialize very reluctantly. Generally, unless there is a specific reason I need to socialize with people, I find it difficult. I'm trying to be better about it because, I've been doing all this therapy, trying to understand my traumas, trying to understand how I got this way, and also recognizing that to function in the world that I am stuck in, I probably should try and socialize more. So like that's still from a practical perspective. I'm trying to find practical reasons to socialize. It's not just something that comes naturally to me. It's very rare for me to find people that interesting unless there's something else going on. For example, the easiest way for me to socialize is to be in a band, because then I have to socialize with my bandmates. I have to talk to fans or potential fans to try and get them to come to our shows and make them feel included. Got to talk to promoters because I did a lot of the band management. That was my big mistake with Rainbow Death Ray. I took on too much. But yeah, I did a lot of our promotions and went out and talked to venue people and also emails, but also meeting people and talking to other bands because you want to play shows with other bands and, you've got to network, all the networking stuff. And that's the reason my Facebook has so many friends on it, because I was just like, yeah, networking. But I don't know who most of them are. I haven't talked to most of them in yonks. Yeah, so music-related things, that helps me socialize because there's a specific reason for it. The networking and being in a band have to do it. If you've got bandmates, you have to talk to them. You can't just... maybe in a specific situation you could just rock up, do your thing and piss off, but the band isn't going to like you very much and you might get kicked out. So, yeah. I have very low social needs. I'm quite happy, when COVID hit, I'm like, shit, hey... This is my world. People are finally having to live the way that I do. Although that did set back my progress in terms of, being able to socialize. I just didn't have enough practice. And now I'm like, oh shit, I have to leave the house. It's taken me a while to build back up to that. Whereas, yeah, autistic people, I think they have more of an instinct to socialize, if that makes sense. Whereas schizoid, no. Don't care. Now, is that a defense mechanism? Probably, but it's so ingrained that I don't have any conscious view that it's a defense mechanism. I feel like it is my nature that I'm not interested in hanging out with other people without a good reason. I have maybe one friend that I will just hang out with randomly, but she's a very extroverted person, and if she hadn't said what great friends we were, I probably wouldn't have occurred to me that we were friends in that way. So it's very much like her personality that's influenced me to spend more time with her, and we can talk about a lot of stuff. So yeah, I'm like, okay, cool, we're pretty good friends then. But I wouldn't have figured it out if she didn't say that. I would just be like, fine, whatever, just another person. So that's kind of an interesting thing about how she managed to work her way into my life like that just by being her. Otherwise, I have friends, but it's hard for me to be like, oh, maybe I should hang out with them, because then I'm like, but why? What are we gonna do? What's the point? We can just chat online. We don't need to, I don't know. But then I find when I do make contact and show an interest with hanging out with some people, they're actually really happy that I contacted them, which is weird to me, because when people contact me to hang out, I kind of just feel like, oh shit, this is another thing I've got to manage. It's an inconvenience in a way. So, it's willingness to socialize. There's a big difference between autism and schizoid. And, I have to keep reminding myself that other people want to socialize and I should do it because it makes them happy. But then I'm like, why do I care about making them happy? What about me? Why can't I just do my own thing? Why can't... Anyway, I think I've made my point, is that's a huge difference. And, superficially, because some autistic people can be very withdrawn and avoid socializing, and as Woodstock Envy says, missing subtle social cues, schizoids aren't missing those cues, we just don't care. And if we act weird, don't care. I will go out in my conservative area with my funny pointy, mohawk hoodie and my little red demon cat thing on my shoulder, just like however, or when I had colored hair, wearing my cat mask, looking like a complete nutcase, and I just don't care. As long as, no one is harassing me or, threatening me, people look at me funny, that's fine. I don't care. I don't even notice. I often forget that I am dressed strange. Because, I just find it fun, but I forget that I look strange to other people. And so sometimes I will notice people staring, and I'm like, am I just being paranoid? What if I'm getting schizophrenic? And then I'm like, wait a minute, I am dressed like a freak. And then I have a little chuckle to myself, because when people judge me, instead of feeling hurt, I feel kind of amused, because they don't know anything about me. They're judging me on my appearance, when I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't have tattoos or any piercings at all, these things. I don't sleep around, I don't do all these things that society frowns on. I just keep to myself. But because I dress funny, people think some strange things about me, which is funny in this neighborhood, because I'm sure some of the more uptight local mothers think that I'm doing drugs and whatever, and when I don't, and I know they will go home and drink a whole bottle of wine and maybe do a bit of cocaine or whatever, and they want to judge me just because I'm a little bit nutty. I don't know. Whatever. You do you, I will do me. I just look different. Anyway, it amuses me, whatever. So it's not that I miss subtle social cues. I mean, sometimes socializing can be a little bit confusing just because other people have concerns and motivations that I don't. So when people are very concerned about some insignificant part of their appearance, I find that hard to understand. And sometimes, I guess, as a schizoid, you can be a little bit insensitive. And I think it's because we just don't relate to some of that stuff. People can get really oddly obsessed with very small things and be very insecure about them, and I'm just like, but why? It looks fine to me. And people ask, I've had, especially my brother, not the disabled one, my other brother, occasionally he'd ask me if he was dressed well. I'm like, I don't fucking know. You've seen my dress fashion. Why would you ask me for fashion advice? I have no clue. I just dress what's either comfortable or what I think is fun. If you want, does this look good to mainstream society? I don't know. Just do whatever you feel comfortable with. There's stuff like that. And yeah, sometimes hanging out with chicks, they'll have concerns about their hair, and I'm like, it looks fine to me. Or, people having concerns about some small thing on their skin, and I'm like, if you hadn't pointed it out, I wouldn't notice, and even now it looks fine to me. That's not to say that I don't see ugliness. Sometimes people are ugly. I actually, what I struggle with is I don't see attractive people. I see just average people and ugly people. That's my world. I don't really see attractiveness. So you're either average or ugly. I know, I probably sound, again, insensitive, but that comes along with being a schizoid. I think it's one of the criteria anyway. So I'm not missing subtle social cues generally. I know how to have a conversation, let other people speak, whatever. Now, if they let me speak, I will keep going until they seem like they don't know how to shut me up. It's just odd because I went to a art gallery thing, and someone mentioned something about ancient Egypt, and then I started saying, oh yeah, this thing. And then they were looking at me like, how do you know that? And so I elaborated, and they did not stop me. And I was a little bit like, am I talking too much? But I think they were genuinely interested because it was an art gallery thing, and of course they're into cultural stuff. And so the fact that I knew a lot about ancient Egypt stuff that I thought they would know, but they didn't. And so in that case, I was like, okay, I'll keep talking. But whereas an autistic person, they will have a special interest that they really like, and sometimes they just don't know when to shut up and can't see when people are getting bored and can't see when no one is interested in the thing. so it's kind of like, it can be a subtle thing, because like as a schizoid, there are some things I don't relate to, but generally I can see what the other person, how to manage the social situation. I don't know. There's probably a bit of nuance in there, but I can see how superficially it'd look similar. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I mean, like, I think kind of Woodstock Envy got pretty close, because saying, like, autistic people not being able to, struggling with the social cues, and then preferring solitude because it's exhausting to socialize. Yes, that is an autism thing. I have heard autistic people describe it that way, that socializing is exhausting because they have to spend so much time with the masking and with trying to pick up on all the things and trying to remember what they need to pick up on, trying to do the eye contact thing and whatever. For me, as a schizoid, I think sometimes I do find socializing exhausting, and it used to be worse when I was younger. These days I'm doing better with it, but I think it's out of boredom. It's not that I'm spending all this time trying to work out how to socialize, because I quite happily just did my own thing, like at family gatherings. Bring my Game Boy, bring a book. People would harass me not to sit in a corner doing that kind of stuff, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'll pat the cat. And then they ask me questions and I'm like, okay, I'll talk. But, I just wasn't that interested in joining in with the socializing. And then people want me to do the socializing, and then I'm like, oh, fuck, this is boring, and like having to answer the same questions over and over. So how's school? So how's work? So how's uni? Very rarely, so how's your band? And then seeing my family members, my extended family, who are very conservative people, not really knowing what the fuck I'm talking about, and I'm like, so why the fuck did you ask? They're just being polite, but hey, if you're gonna be just polite, I'm gonna tell you shit anyway. That's your punishment for harassing me about it, I guess. Yeah, socializing's tiring because people expect you to be interested in stuff and expect you to get excited about stuff. Like, people announce something, and socially I know I'm supposed to be excited for them because, it's some kind of celebration, and I'm just like, yeah, but, like, birthdays, it's just, another thing. It's an arbitrary point in the calendar in our journey around the sun. I've always struggled with birthdays. Probably doesn't help that I have a bit of, like, trauma-ish, because my parents sucked at knowing what I actually wanted for my birthday, so there was a point where I started being very specific about what I wanted rather than trusting them to understand me and, give me something I actually like instead of something that's just going to make me upset because why the fuck did you buy me this shit? Sorry, there was one time, the worst time that I can remember is when Dad bought me the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is his thing. He bought it because he likes it. I don't like that. I tried to read it. It's so wordy and like has all this stuff like, oh, here's the valley and here's every excruciating detail about what the valley is like. And I'm like, I do not give a shit. That was not the kind of fantasy I was into. Yeah, I was pretty upset the day that he got me that, and I remember later in the day after work, Mum got me like some lollies, and I'm like, yay, great birthday. Anyway, that's like child me, I guess, and I just had a lot of issues with birthdays after that. I think before that as well, and I never really understood why it was such an exciting thing to be alive for another year. These days I try harder, but it's still, underneath, I'm still like, yeah, it's just, who cares, really? Well, our species is so obsessed with celebrating every tiny thing. Anyway, no, social scoop. Okay, so socializing. I think we've beaten that to death already, and hopefully YouTube realizes that's just a saying, and I'm not actually threatening anyone. Never really sure what I'm allowed to say on this platform. But so, like, I was almost going to make a separate video about this, but I realized I don't have as much to say about it as I thought. But my psychiatrist, the last psychiatrist I saw, I think he decided before I even walked in that I had autism. And then after a few months of seeing him, I would only see him for like half an hour every 6 weeks. So how is he going to get to know me? Good luck. And after so many months of doing that, he still thought I had autism. Now, I guarantee you, I know what happened here. First of all, I sent through a whole lot of, my records, and I think I probably sent in an explanation of my issues just to catch him up on stuff, because there's a lot. I have a long mental health history. Now, I've done this before with another psychiatrist a long time ago, and he thought I was obsessive, but then he would screen me for OCD, and it would never be like, yeah, I might be obsessive, but I'm not compulsive. And he screened me also for like bipolar. Like, I know what those questions are targeted at. And he could never quite figure me out. Autism never came up on his radar, though, and he's probably the best psychiatrist I ever saw. He also didn't pick up on the schizoid, though, but at the time I was saying I had no problems with my childhood because I didn't realize I had problems with my childhood. So, yeah, I think that would have helped him figure it out if I had known what my own issues were. I had no idea. I thought I was just depressed, and I was like, why is nothing working? Anyway, so that was the best psychiatrist I ever saw. But the last psychiatrist I saw, I was a bit more careful not to be too obsessive in how much I sent through, but I was like, he needs to understand this. He needs to understand the schizoid thing, because that's kind of important. That's not knowing that I had schizoid, I think, affected my treatment for a very long time. So I had to send enough stuff through. I think one of the letters from one of my psychologists mentioned possible dissociative identity disorder. I realize now that's probably what got sent to him, and he dismissed dissociation immediately. Didn't even ask me why that was on my record, but never mind, that's a different issue. No, because I sent all that in, instead of thinking I was obsessive, I'm pretty sure he's like, oh, this is autism because I'm being too detailed. I'm just like, I'm not always that detailed. I don't always bother with that. I just was actually trying to make an effort this time. So I think before I even walked in, he thought autism. Oh, schizoid, that's like autism. No one has schizoid. Okay, then I came in, and what happens when I go into those kinds of, it's interview-ish. I would probably try better in an interview, because if I was trying to get a job, you try and act the way that you need to. But with, appointments. When I go to appointments, like this is the same with the doctor and psychologists, psychiatrists, all these people. Because with the mental health stuff, you can be talking about some confronting stuff, and it can be anxiety-provoking, and there's a lot of things that I never opened up to people for a long time, especially the dissociation stuff. So my eyes do tend to wander in that situation, because, when you look directly at someone, it can be kind of confronting. There are actually one thing that confused me as a child. Like, I had good eye contact, but then I heard that in some tribes, it's actually rude and considered a challenge to look someone in the eye, and also with dogs and wolves, like looking them in the eye apparently can be a challenge. And so like at that point in time, I was overthinking it, and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't make eye contact. So I had like the opposite problem to autism. Anyway, where autistic people were trying to make eye contact because they were told that's right, whereas I was overthinking it and trying not to make eye contact. That's me being backwards. But no, I know when I walked into his office, and he's got like this, he had this sort of planner kind of thing that I think had psychiatry conventions or like events or something. I can't even remember, it's been a while. And then he had 2 different computer screens, and they were different sizes. And just like, it's a new environment. And so when I went in there, like, yeah, I said hi to him and whatever, but I was also looking around the room, looking at like, there were these funny light things. So I'm kind of like looking at my surroundings, and also anxious because I have to open up to yet another person who I don't know in the medical field. Like, the medical field is much more nerve-wracking than opening up on YouTube. Even though I know that just about anyone could watch my YouTube, in the medical field, it just feels like another level of seriousness, I guess. And so I just was like, so I look around the place because it's an anxiety response. It's not because I don't know to look at his eyes. It's not because it's not an automatic thing to look at people's eyes. It's just like, I'm trying to avoid having to look at them out of anxiety. He will have seen that and been like, no eye contact, that's autism. He's misinterpreted that signal, okay? Then, not being interested in social stuff looks like autism, but that's not the motivation behind not socializing. Very different. And then, there's a lot of stuff with autism that I don't have. I don't have sensory issues. I mean, you could argue that I have preferences, but everyone has preferences. Everyone has, like, fabrics they like, flavors they like, music sounds they like. My not disabled brother, he doesn't like the sounds of knives sharpening, and, like, will get very agitated. And no one accuses him of having autism. He's much better adjusted than I am. But he doesn't like that particular sound, the sort of chalkboard nails thing. And I'm like, it's fine. I was a picky eater when I was younger. A lot of kids go through that. Taste preferences. Your taste buds change over time as well. A lot of your senses change over time. No, I just, like, I prefer to be comfortable, but I can wear goth clothes if I really want to. It's not a big deal. I don't have those meltdowns over some kind of sensory thing. So I don't have sensory symptoms. I don't have, like, special interests. I can get deeply interested in things for short periods of time, but then I quickly lose interest once I've gotten to a certain point. I don't cling to it. And, I have been to things like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon card things, also, like, a Pokemon, like, DS event. I've been to some of those, like, nerdy events, and that's where I realize I am not nerdy enough. And I guarantee you, some of those people who are really intense would be people with autistic special interests. And so they're so deep in whatever that fandom is that someone like me who doesn't care that much cannot compete. Like, they know everything. And they're just, like, next level with their skills and, like, knowledge and all that. And I'm just like, fuck, I don't give that much of a shit. Come on. So I can get interested in things to a point. But I can't hold on to that interest, and I can't, like, there's a certain point I'm just like, why the fuck am I doing this? I have heard anecdotally from other schizoids watching my content and, some correspondence that it's probably our anhedonia that makes it hard. So, like, we might find a new novel thing, and we're like, oh, maybe this is the thing I will finally be interested in, and get very intense with it. But then the anhedonia, we don't get the reward cycle that keeps it going. So, like, for a while we'll be like, yay, new thing. And then it quickly goes stale because there's no reward being maintained there. Like, it's very hard for me to maintain an interest. My main interests that I maintain are to do with dissociation. That dissociated part of me is the one that has more obsessions, like all this fucking split personality fiction. That is coming from the dissociated part of me. Most of the time, I don't give a shit. Yeah. And, like, even though there is this obsession, it's only to a certain point. I don't know everything about Fight Club. I don't know everything about Venom. In fact, when the second Venom movie came out, and, like, the end scene of the first Venom movie, and everyone got excited about it, and I'm like, who cares? Not me. So it's, like, very specific things in that get me interested, but not enough that I can get really deep into it. So, I think in my quest to fill the anhedonia and fill the hole that schizoid creates and the depression and all that, I'm always trying to find new things. That's been my pattern throughout my life, but I will pick up hobbies and drop them because I just can't maintain the interest. Whereas someone with autism, they can get so deep, then they can hold that for ages. A long time. Like, yes, sometimes their special interests evolve, but they have much more consistency with it than someone with schizoid. Now, that's not to say every schizoid's like that. And again, there can be some overlap with schizoid and autism. And I suppose, like, autism, depending on how you're treated as a kid, you could have negative experiences that also give you the schizoid layer. I guess that's one way it could happen, but no, I can't do that stuff. Yeah, so and then there's some behaviors in autism that can be kind of specific, like stimming. I tried that when I was a kid because I was surrounded by autistic kids, so I would see them rocking, and so I tried the rocking thing and got bored of that very quickly as well, So there's a lot of things that are quite different from a schizoid experience to an autistic experience. Now, of course, I can't say for sure because I'm one person. I don't have pure schizoid. I have depression and some kind of unspecified dissociative issue. So other schizoids' experiences may vary, but these are the things that strike me the most based on myself and what I've heard and what I've read. Yeah. And, like, having met some people with autism and, the interactions with autistic people, it is interesting to see like where we click and where we don't. And this is in a variety of situations, usually in music. But yeah, it's just interesting to me, like when, and you know, sometimes I can pick it, sometimes not so much, but sometimes I just have a sense of when someone is autistic. Yeah, probably because I've been around it for so long, even though I was around more severe cases, like I've started to understand and notice more what the mild cases are like. Although our society is making autism milder and milder and milder in terms of what they'll recognize, so at some point it's probably going to lose meaning, which is unfortunate, but that's how a lot of things go. I hope that sort of addressed this. Like, schizoid, it's not necessarily high functioning. We can give the illusion of being high functioning. I can sit here and make what I hope is a reasonably articulate 40-minute video. But I'm not functioning in my life. You could argue that's the depression, but you know, it's an illusion. Like, I can seem high functioning, I am not. I have had to accept that myself. Like, I thought I was doing fine, I just had some issues. But now I'm like, no, I'm actually pretty damn broken. I don't feel offended by that either. There's actually another thing that I've noticed is a bit different between autism and schizoid. I mean, autistic people are more likely to form communities around fandoms, around issues, around being autistic. Schizoid's not so much. There aren't, like, I know there's maybe a schizoid Reddit, and there's a few people who've tried to start clubs, but I think a lot of schizoids keep to themselves. I know I have a lot of schizoid viewers. I think the vast majority of them never say anything. So could you call it a community? Are they just watching me to understand their own experience, but they don't actually want to connect? Probably. And I'm also not that, it bothers me that I've sort of, you know, people are starting to see me as like some kind of schizoid YouTuber. Like, that's what I wanted to avoid from the beginning. But people keep coming to that video. That video is still getting views. My original schizoid video is still getting views. Some of my other schizoid videos are still doing well. And I'm just like, oh, what have I got myself into? But yeah, no, anyway, so schizoids less likely to form communities, and that's why I'm probably one of the only schizoid YouTubers around still. There's like maybe 2 or 3 others that I know of. I don't really look for them. I am not personally that interested in schizoid. I think it's one of the least interesting things about me, but people keep asking, so here we are, because I don't know what else to make content. No, I actually have a long to-do list of things to make content about, but this one's pretty easy to do off the top of my head. All my videos are off the top of my head. Anyway, no, what was the point I was getting to? You see, I'm trying to be articulate, but then I'll wander off into some other thought. No, some other part of my own little thought world. Anyway, no. I've noticed that people with autism tend to be more easily offended. Now, a lot of our society tends to be easily offended, so I'm not saying it's necessarily an autistic thing, but in terms of differences between autism and schizoid, you know, a lot of autistic people, if their special interest, for example, is a social cause, they can get really deep into that social cause and can then become very upset if you say something that contradicts what they believe about that cause. Potentially more than the average activist who isn't autistic in that group, because, you know, autism can come with meltdowns, and I think that can feed into some of that behavior around being offended. Whereas schizoids, it's kind of hard to phase a schizoid. Now, that's not to say schizoids can't be offended, but they're not going to show it as much. Schizoid, I think some of it is about not feeling. But if you think of it as a defense mechanism, because something happened to us when we were kids and we decided to, like, our brains decided to protect ourselves, we've got to have some kind of shell. Okay, so maybe outwardly, I think this is one of the criteria, is like they don't show reaction to judgment or something. But not showing a reaction doesn't mean you have no reaction. Maybe that reaction is subconscious and you're not even aware of it. Maybe you are conscious, but you're like, I'm not going to show anyone that hurts me. So schizoids, I think, are less likely to be offended than autistic people. I think that's a weird social thing. Maybe it would be nice if someone could do some actual research on that, except that schizoids don't come forward for research. So how is anyone going to find out and confirm this idea? It's just something I've noticed. Because, you know, people will try and offend me. Being a YouTuber is an interesting experience because people can be kind of nasty in the comments. There's less of it these days. I don't know if that's because I'm not attracting those kinds of comments or if it's because YouTube just deletes things before I get a chance to see them. But yeah, no, these days it's not as bad as it used to be. But when someone does come along with some kind of narrow comment where they're angry with me for saying something and they tell me horrible things, I actually find it kind of amusing. I don't know if that's weird. I'm just like, look at this person and their emotions. Maybe that's why I relate to some villains in things like Doctor Who, the Cyberman thing. I really like Nightmare in Silver. I know what's-his-face, the writer, didn't like Neil Gaiman didn't like how they did that, but I actually really like that episode, and he's like, emotions! Look at this huge mistake you made because of your emotions. I guess, I'm just like, maybe that's why I relate to villains sometimes, because, it's just like, these funny humans and their emotions, leading them into these funny little situations that are completely, you don't have to be that upset about that thing. Anyway, whereas I think autistic people are more likely to be high empathy in some cases, and very passionate about causes, and can get upset if those things are threatened. That's another thing. Anyway, so here's me accidentally being a schizoid YouTuber. God, how did this happen? Anyway, if you want more schizoid content, search my channel for either the keyword, in my channel, there's a little search box. Search for schizoid or search for SPD. You'll find stuff. And I suppose I'll answer more comments. I have other things I want to talk about. But every now and then I will feed you some schizoid stuff, I guess. I mean, it's part of my experience, so I can't just not talk about it just to avoid being a schizoid YouTuber. I don't know. I don't want to be like a schizoid channel. So you're still going to get, I've got to finish that other Ant video. That's some high quality content. I like messing with people. I think some of the obsessions I get into, those brief fleeting obsessions, I kind of treat them as a bit of an anthropology exercise. When your old British white dudes used to go into the tribes and try and immerse themselves to understand these strange people, that kind of anthropology. So when I was doing the makeup thing a few months ago, it really was I'm an alien in a foreign world and I'm trying to understand these makeup people and their funny skin concerns and the way that the makeup industry is manipulating them to worry about little lines. And I'm like, for a while I was like, is this really a concern? And then I'm looking at other stuff and I'm like, no, this is just marketing bullshit. They're trying to manipulate me. I don't need to buy that stuff. And they don't even know if this stuff works. Yes, some of the components of skincare have been proven to do things, but the particular combinations in the products, they haven't been tested. No one knows. It's a funny world we live in. I do feel like an alien watching a lot of this stuff. Anyway, that is long enough. Holy shit, we're almost up to 50 minutes. Again, this is going to take forever to upload. I'm surprised my dog hasn't bothered me. He did come out before. But, no, he's doing well. I need to get some tea. Entertain him for a bit, maybe give him a brush. This is a brilliant ending to the video. I know I do what look like a lot of endings. Just thinking, is there anything else I missed for one last little rant? No, I think I've made it pretty clear that there's some solid differences between schizoid and autism, and I know Mad Simple likes to joke that I have autism. No. And the funny thing about that psychiatrist who decided, who just thought the whole time that I had autism, there's another tangent to go on, that guy, the last session I went to with him, he still said, I still think you have autism. And I said, okay, in that case, should I go and get tested? And he said no, and didn't give me a good reason why. So how can you say I have autism but then not want me to get a proper validated test? I get it, because what would a diagnosis achieve? Well, I'm probably not going to get any extra government support. I'm too old, and, I would be very mildly on the spectrum if that's what the case was. And it's expensive, it's $1,000 or something, probably more than that these days. Yeah, but for me, why it's important for me to know my diagnosis is then we can form a treatment plan. And the treatment plans for autism versus schizoid are quite different. With autism, it's like about managing, the way that your brain is working and finding ways to work with your autism. Whereas with the schizoid, we don't really know how to treat it, but perhaps by addressing my childhood issues and like different ways of thinking, a bit of CBT, DBT. I think, I've gone back to the psychologist I first saw after getting the diagnosis, and she's into schema therapy. And, we've been we're probably going to focus more on dissociation because that's the thing that I understand the least still. But, whether I have autism or schizoid, it makes a big difference to how we're going to treat it, how we're going to look at it in therapy, what issues are we going to look at, because autism generally isn't it's not a childhood trauma thing, whereas schizoid is, and I clearly do have childhood trauma issues, which goes with the dissociation as well. So that's why it's important. And he's saying, don't get assessed, don't get this confirmed, and I'm like, are you crazy? If I have autism, I need to know, because then that changes a lot. So there's that. Also, I never went back. I tried to sound open, but I generally don't tell these people when I'm about to drop out of therapy. I might give like a small sign, and they generally don't pick it up. Unfortunately, psychology and psychiatry is not like in the movies. Not like I've got wire in the blood somewhere here. That's what got me interested in psychology. It's not like that. They can't read shit. They don't know. It's very unusual to meet any kind of mental health professional who can pick up on subtle cues and figure you out and know when you're hiding things. They suck at it. I spent years hoping someone would notice the dissociation thing, and in the end I had to just open up about it because they can't see anything. Okay. Anyway, why did I get onto that? I don't know. The psychiatrist. So, because I dropped out without telling him, without really warning him. So he, I can't remember exactly how it happened, but between that psychiatrist and the psychologist that I've just dropped out of in the same way, the only sign I gave her that I might drop out of therapy is I was complaining about the high cost of that clinic. And, we moved to monthly sessions, and I told her usually when I get to these, when things become less frequent, I'm more inclined to drop out. That was my hint to her that I'm not coming back. I'm not a confrontational person. I can't say, I think you're too expensive and you're not very good. You're not exploring the issues I want to explore. I'm out of here. I can't do that. I have to be like, yeah, so money's hard, and if we move to a month, that helps with the money, but I might not come. That's usually when I drop out. And then I did. And I didn't even tell her. I just emailed reception. And then she sent me an email to follow up. But I'm pretty sure she doesn't actually care, so I didn't bother even replying to that. Yeah, I like my current psychologist. The one that I've gone back to, I like her a lot better. I think she actually gives a shit. She actually tries. She puts in so much work and hardly charges me anything. By comparison. No. So that last psychiatrist I saw and the psychologist I've just dropped out of, they eventually did have a phone call. I never went back to the psychiatrist to hear if he'd really changed his perspective, but I asked the psychologist about it, and she said, he was bringing up all this stuff about autism, but she kept making the point that could still be schizoid. Like, nothing he brought up was autism specific. It was all things that can overlap with schizoid. So she was not convinced about the autism thing, and she didn't tell me to go and get assessed for autism either. She was quite happy to continue treating me with the schizoid diagnosis. So that's what happened there. There's no point going back to see what he thought in the end. I think the trouble with that psychiatrist, his clinic was very ADHD focused. They actually have specific appointments for ADHD, and then they have general appointments. But because they see a lot of ADHD, these days, I haven't really looked into it, but there seems to be a bit more overlap between ADHD and autism, or at least mild autism, because a lot of people are starting to get diagnoses of both. I don't know if that's because both of them are starting to get, very light end of the spectrum recognized. I'm not sure. But for whatever reason, ADHD and autism are being seen together a lot. And so I think that clinic, as well as ADHD, they probably also see a lot of autism. I think he probably had a special interest in autism, and that's why he wanted to see autism in me, because he wants to see autistic clients. So he's looking for every small thing I do that might be autism. In the same way that when I saw the DID specialist, she was very deep into DID stuff. That's what she wants to find. She wants to find DID clients. So when she's talking to me, I mean, I did try and explain the experiences I have, but she didn't actually see me switch. I told her I don't have memory issues, and we didn't, like, you know, there wasn't enough time to get super deep into it. I only saw her for 3 sessions, but even after the first one, like, you know, she said, oh, I believe you. If you had come in here being like, oh, I'm so happy I have all these alters, I would have been like, nah, but, you know, you seem legit, blah, blah, blah. I think she actually thought that I have DID, based on a very short assessment and very small detail, because that's what she wants to find. You know, it's that whole thing of when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Guy who likes autism can only see autism. Chick who likes DID can only see DID. There's no way. You need to have more severe memory deficits for DID. Like, at a stretch, the best you could diagnose me with is either partial DID or OSDD, which are the same thing regardless of what the CTAD clinic says, and that's another rant. But yeah, so that's one of the problems with specialists, is if they're specialists because they're good at it and knowledgeable, fine, but if they're specialists who also have a special interest in the thing, which generally they do, sometimes you can get misdiagnosed because that's what they want to find. A good autism assessment should be able to differentiate between autism and other disorders, and they should give you a suggestion at the end of what you have. At least when a while back when I was looking at autism, getting an autism diagnosis, you know, going through that process, they were saying at the end they can do differential diagnosis. That kind of thing I respect, but if people are just trying to label you with autism, run a mile, because it's a biased thing. Which brings me actually to one final thought. I think this is a final thought, because we're almost at an hour. But I do think that some people being diagnosed with autism today might actually be schizoids who are being misdiagnosed with autism. Just a thought. So maybe like some of this overlap that Woodstock Envy is seeing, it could be misdiagnosed schizoid. And it's possible that someone could be misdiagnosed with schizoid but actually be autistic too. There could be that, but I think because autism is in vogue, I think it's more likely that someone would be misdiagnosed autistic when actually they're schizoid or actually have something else. Or could have both. Schizoid has overlap not just with autism, but also other personality disorders, depression like I've got, dissociation, like personality disorders often don't have strong senses of identity. So then things like dissociation, like that sense of self not being quite right. There's a lot of anyway, the whole thing about differential diagnosis is a minefield. It's almost been an hour. I'm surprised the dog has not come to bother me. Yeah. My next, I do have like a list of other videos to make. It's a new list of videos to make because I'm constantly making lists of videos to make, and then I don't make them, and then I forget about them, and then I forget where I saved the file. But this one's on my desktop, so we've done the autism one. There's a few more comments that I want to look at. And then there is like a whole WordPad document of things, and I'm trying to remember what other videos I either said I would make or people asked me to make. So if there are other videos you've been waiting for, pop them in the comments. I do know that I never got around to making that Taylor Swift cover. Music things I think are going to be different just because I haven't figured out my life with the dog, and they can be a lot to set up. Anyway, we're not going to get to an hour. I'm going to make sure of that. I'm going. Bye.